Welcome to the second half of the weekly rundown for the upcoming week six. We're going to focus on wide receivers, tight ends, and defense in this one, and then get to the questions. London, I liked Odell Beckham heading into this week, but now it sounds like he may or may not play. I thought him coming back into last week's game pretty much meant that he was a lock, but it's sounding like that's not the case. And unfortunately, he plays Monday. So although this looks like it's going to be a high scoring game, the team's applied total is 27. And I thought it was one of those games that Beckham could go, 100 and a touchdown. It's not looking like it's a sure thing, which makes him a very hard proposition in cash games. So I'm going to kind of veer off him and I'm going to focus on Randall Cobb, who, everyone seems like they've been going with James Jones because he's the guy who has been finding the end zone. I don't think this game against San Diego is really the game to target him. San Diego's been brutal against the run, so I think you're going to see a lot of Eddie Lacy. And San Diego, according to Football Outsiders, has actually been forgiving to the number one target, which, Randall Cobb's not your typical number one target, as he'll probably line up in the slot and elsewhere. But besides that, he's been very tough on wide receivers, and I think James Jones kind of projects as one of those receivers that they've been tough against. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to rely, on at home on the passing game somewhat. Until last week, he was never throwing interceptions, and he was a monster at home. And then he threw a few interceptions at home last week. He'll probably improve this week. I think Randall Cobb will get back to the between 8 and 12 targets he saw between weeks 2 and 4. I think he only saw 5 last week. So I think Cobb is a safe proposition, and in cash games, that's really what you want is just the receptions. And I think he's got a chance for the end zone too with the point total. Who do you like?
I like Julian Edelman going against the Indianapolis Colts. You think about Edelman on the season, man. He averages nearly 100 yards per game, and I think oftentimes, you look at him and you think, man, this guy's not a number one wide receiver. You look at his size; he plays the slot a lot, but he's just out there making guys look ridiculous. He had the Cowboys defensive backs on skates last week. You'll have to check that out on Vine. I had Maurice Claiborne on skates, or more is it Claiborne? I forget his first name with the Dallas Cowboys. He's a Cowboy, so who cares? but you know, Julian Edelman is a guy I like. Again, you think about the Patriots going to Indianapolis. I hate to keep bringing it up, but Deflategate, it makes a difference, and you better believe they'll be looking to run up the score on the Colts and throw that football around. And then another wide receiver I like, Emmanuel Sanders. You're talking about the Denver Broncos facing the Cleveland Browns defense, who just another underperforming defense. There won't be a Joe Hayden out there for the Browns. He's has a concussion. So you look at Emmanuel Sanders, he'll definitely have a big game. I like him against the Cleveland Browns defense.
Yeah, the weird part is Peyton Manning's been playing so bad, but the wide receivers have been putting up fine performances. I mean, they're just I guess catching the short passes, the ones that Peyton Manning can complete at this point. So Emmanuel Sanders a good option again next week. Let's go to the tight end position. I think we've covered the Patriots. Or Gronkowski's a play, so I'm gonna go somewhere else. I'm gonna assume that you're paying up at the other positions. Maybe you pay for Forte, maybe Beckham plays, and I'm gonna go Jordan Cameron with the Dolphins. Tennessee has allowed the least amount of passing yards, so I think people are gonna overlook this. But I'm looking at Jordan Cameron's price, 6,800, which is almost near the minimum. And this is a team that allowed 110 yards and 2 touchdowns to Austin Safarian Jenkins. I mean, Andrew Luck he spreads the ball around and he found, Kobe Fleener 4 for 51. And the other matchups were against Johnny Manziel and an injured Tyrod Taylor. So I think, coming off the bye where they've got a new coach who was a tight ends coach, mind you, who they promoted. I think they're going to try and find the tight end for 6,800. So I think he makes a lot of sense against the team, even though they've been so good, allowing the ninth most fantasy points to the tight end. Who do you like?
I like two guys, and one guy who just came back off suspension, Antonio Gates, and he looked like he hasn't missed a beat. You talking about what he did the other night against the Pittsburgh Steelers? 92 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Him and Phillip Rivers has a tremendous connection together. I like him. Um, as far as facing the Green Bay Packers, even though it'll be in Lambeau and the Green Bay's defense is pretty tough, but Gates is just a matchup nightmare. He's so savvy savvy and understands how to run routes and understands how to get open. And Philip Rivers, he always feels comfortable getting the ball to him. Another guy, Cleveland, Gary Barnidge, tight end for Cleveland, Gary Barnidge. And you look at him last week, and he came up big. Last two ball games, 75 yards in one game. I think another 110 yards in the game against the Ravens. He's averaging 6 receptions per game in the last two, so he's getting a ton of targets and he's making the most out of those targets. So going against the Denver defense, we know how stout Denver is against the run. We know how good the corners are for Denver, but the matchup you have to like if you're going to like a tight end is the Browns tight end going against maybe some of their linebackers and even the safety. So Gary Barnes is a guy that I would play, and he's not going to cost you a ton of money either on our site.
Yeah, and a couple notes there. One of my favorite tweets this week was Gary Barnidge can attribute his touchdown to the work he's done on the Thigh Master after he caught that touchdown with his legs. And I did write this week that Josh McCown was a guy I was avoiding, but I thought Gary Barnidge was the one guy in the offense who still should have a decent little week. So I agree with that pick. Moving on to defense. Amazingly, I'm going to go with the Chicago Bears, a team not really known for their defense, but you look at this Lions team who benched Matt Stafford last week after all his turnovers and ineffectiveness. I mean, this is just a team that you want to target defenses against simply. I mean, there's something going on here with Stafford. Calvin's aging. It took them 18 targets to get Golden Tate 8 receptions last week. So there's all kinds of ineffectiveness on that offense. They can't establish a run game. I'm just going to use a defense against them. The Bears are cheap. I'm just going to assume, they're going to turn the ball over a few times. The offensive line is weak, so it'll probably get sacks. I expect them to give up points, but for 4,700, you can deal with that if they get the turnovers. Who do you like?
I like Miami, Miami, Tennessee, not Miami's defense. I'm sorry, I like Tennessee's defense against the Dolphins. I know the Miami Dolphins have made the head coaching change, and they brought in Dan Campbell or elevated him to become the head coach, and he's trying to change the culture around there with a more physical brand of football, doing Oklahoma drills and all that, but they haven't changed the talent on that football team. And right now, the Miami Dolphins offense has not gotten it done. I like them. I like Tennessee's defense, against the Dolphins. So that's the defense I look at as a play.
There you go. Moving on to the questions, I actually want to get right to them since you've kind of mentioned the Patriots a bunch of times, and I'm curious on your thoughts because I know I've been going back and forth with friends early this week, seeing what they think on this guy. What are your thoughts on LeGarrette Blount? And he is the Patriots' big back against the Indianapolis Colts. And I want to read you a stat that's just stands out to me. The Patriots, quote unquote, big back running back lines the last 3 times they faced the Colts. LeGarrette Blount, 30 carries for 148 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jonas Gray, 37 carries, 201 yards, and 4 touchdowns. LeGarrette Blount, 25 carries, 166 yards, and 4 touchdowns the last 3 games. Now, 35% of LeGarrette Blount's 20 rushing touchdowns have come against the Patriots since he's been on the team. Do you have to like him this week because of these stats? What do you think?
That's a tough one, and I've kind of played around with it, thinking, okay, trying to get into the mind of Belichick. Is he going to continue to go with what he's done in the past against the Colts? Kind of pound them. But when I look at the Patriots offense and what they've been able to do this season, I still I kind of hold off on LeGarrette Blount because I think they'll throw the football around a lot more. And the way Deion Lewis is playing, you can't just take him out of the mix. And sure, Blount will get his carries and he may get some touchdowns just from a short yardage standpoint. But as far as you know, getting 25 carries, I don't think that's going to happen this week.
Yeah, that's the problem with these kind of backs is in our format, the PPR format, if they're not catching passes, you need 2 touchdowns. I mean, Dion Lewis can do in 6 touches what Blunt would need 20 touches to do. So it's a very difficult proposition for those guys. I just thought we'd throw that name out there. All right, this one comes from Michael Rapol, Ripol on Twitter. He asks, is it too risky to play Foster and Hopkins together, or guys like Edelman, Gronk, and Lewis? I think I know your thoughts on the second one, but what do you think of stacking on the site?
I don't mind you stacking Gronk, Gronk, Edelman, and Lewis. Those guys are producing every week, so there's nothing wrong with stacking, especially if you like the matchup that they're going against. You know, what's not to like about New England? Those three guys every week, favorable matchup regardless. But as you look at Hopkins and Foster, you have to consider the matchup and say, okay, is that a team that I feel good about pairing those two guys with. They're making another quarterback change in Houston, so it's too risky, I think, with the Houston Texans.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that I think if you're going to play one, Arian Foster's the guy this week. Doug Martin just made the Jaguars look like a high school defense last week, and I think they find a way to get Foster the football. All right, because we like to stay topical on this podcast. There was a debate last night, whether you saw it or not. We are not a political show, so I don't want to get into that. But what I do want to ask you is, if you were running for president, London, what would your slogan be, and who would you choose as your vice president?
Oh man, my slogan would be the Iron Man can. That's my slogan. The Iron Man can. I can do what you need. I can do what this country needs to be done. So that would be my slogan as far as my running mate. Think outside the box. I would think female. So just to get the kind of change it up a little bit. I think my running mate. Maybe maybe Olivia Pope. Yeah, you need someone like her on your team.
There you go. So Fletcher Pope running against Kanye West and Kardashian in 2020. So start thinking about who you're going to vote for. Until next time, I'm Ricky Sanders with London Fletcher, and we are out.